Hi, my name is Sage, and you're listening to Ink Ink. This is the finale of a 4-part series on tattoos. Last episode, we learned about the path to becoming a tattoo artist and took a peek inside of the industry. Today, we're exploring the do's and don'ts for your first tattoo. How is the pricing of a tattoo decided? Which bodily areas will hurt more than others? All of that will be covered in today's episode of Ink Ink with me, Sage. Getting your first tattoo can be nerve-wracking. After all, this is something that will be on your body forever. You may have some questions.
How painful are tattoos?
Where could I go to get my first tattoo?
Are they always needles that have to put the color in the tattoo?
Do they hurt?
How much are tattoos?
So, are tattoos permanent?
We hope to answer all of your questions in today's episode of Ink Ink. Let's start off with one of the most important things to consider. Who will you get tattooed by? Ray is a hairdresser with a fair amount of tattoos who has some advice to offer.
One of the important things for me when I got my first tattoo, and still to this day, is that I do a lot of research. I look at reviews online. I actually visit different shops and talk to the artists that are working in there. I ask to see some of their work. I kind of look at the hygiene of the place. Is it clean? So I take all those things into consideration.
Do your research. Pick an artist that you like.
You just heard the voice of Nick Scialino, who also has a number of tattoos. If you still aren't convinced to do your research, here is Joe Furio, a tattoo artist at Tough Luck Tattoos in Lewis, Delaware.
I would just say make sure you do your research and check out all the artists.
Social media is an excellent way to see different artists' work. Some even use it as a platform to present their work. Lindsay April is a tattoo artist who works at Agaro Tattoo in Wilmington, Delaware.
Instagram is my portfolio. Actually.
Matt Stankus owns a local shop, Northside Tattoos, in Bellefonte.
Social media has become a huge platform for artists to really show off their work and to get their different styles out there and to show the world what they're doing.
Who does your tattoo has a major impact on how pieces can turn out, especially since many artists have many different styles. It also may be good to research any symbolism behind a tattoo you like. For example,
I remember talking to a tattooer when I was doing interviews, and she was talking about kids coming in to get tattooed. Not kids, she meant younger adults that were, generally 18, and saying that kid who had recently come in wanted a spider web with a black widow spider on his elbow. She was sitting here trying to convince him, and I think it was a black widow spider. It could be another type of spider, but I'm pretty sure that's what she said. Convince him to not get this tattoo. But he wasn't buying it in a certain sense. And finally she had to break down and say, look, you realize if you're ever incarcerated, a spider web is a symbol of being incarcerated. Oh. On top of that, the spider you want is associated with neo-Nazi movements.
That was Dr. David Lane, a sociologist who teaches at Illinois State University. An image that may look cool to you may actually mean something completely different to certain people. It's also smart to make sure you aren't just pulling a piece off the internet to tattoo straight onto your skin. You can use tattoos for inspiration, but it's never good to plagiarize a tattoo that could mean something special to the original owner of that same tattoo. So now that you've chosen an image for inspiration, a flash, or created an original piece, you should consider the placement of that tattoo.
I'm a little bit nervous. I want to get a tattoo on the side of my head, but I'm bald, so in the event that I would ever have to cover it, I don't really have any hair to grow so that you wouldn't be able to see it.
Would a visible tattoo be a threat to any job of yours? Does it matter? If the answer is yes, you want to consider locations easy to conceal, such as your arms, torso, and legs. Not only should you think about whether you should be able to conceal your tattoo, but also consider the level of pain you'll experience when getting a tattoo in a certain area.
As far as pain-wise, there's a lot of spots on the body that have different levels of pain. I would say arms and legs are generally some of the easiest ones. Arms definitely more so than legs. I would say anything on the torso is pretty much going to be unpleasant. Personally, me, I don't have my whole body tattooed, but the worst spot that I've had personally so far was on my stomach. It was just absolute torture. I'm not going to lie to you. An arm is usually a good starting point. I know a lot of people on their first tattoos, I don't know what it is about it, but a lot of people will get on some of the most painful spots, like on the side of their ribs or on their wrists.
It's better to ease yourself into the process. Don't jump straight into getting tattoos that are a 10 on the pain scale. Another painful thing to think about is how much money you're willing to spend. Tattoos are pricey.
It can get kind of expensive depending on what you want. You have to think sometimes about, priorities. If it was up to me, my whole body would probably be covered, but there's things like rent and utilities and things like that. But then again, you're paying for their time and their skill.
But how exactly are they priced?
It really all depends. You can have something that, say, is 4 inches by 4 inches. That it all depends on the complexity of the design. You could have something that's 4 inches by 4 inches that costs $100. You could have the same thing that takes up the same amount of space with different detail, more color, a lot more that goes into it that could then cost $300. So you have something that's taking up the same area, but can be priced drastically different. So it really all depends on what the person's getting, how long it's going to take, the amount of detail, the placement on the body. Once we see the piece, we can price it out for you. But it's like saying, how much is that bag of groceries? Is that bag of groceries filled with ramen noodles, or is that bag of groceries filled with lobster and caviar?
It depends on how much detailing goes into your tattoo and how much time is spent. Speaking of time, tattoos may take longer than we think. If you remember in the last episode, Tracing the Path, we heard Dr. David Lane talk about how TV shows have caused us to think that a tattoo takes a short amount of time.
Television shows, say, have a format of a half hour, which means, what do they have, 21 or 23 minutes to actually produce content? Clients would come in that sort of are informed because they've watched a lot of television shows about tattooing. But what they've seen on television isn't necessarily accurate compared to the actual labor of tattooing. On television, and I'm going to use an example that a tattooer gave me. On television, somebody comes in and says, I want this big tattoo, and by the time that half hour shows up, the tattooist has drawn it, they've tattooed the whole thing, and they're sending somebody away with a completed tattoo. And the reality is, drawing an image that size might take hours or days, depending on somebody's schedule. Tattooing a large image is going to take multiple visits over multiple days, weeks, or months. And so clients were coming in with these sort of misrepresentations of what tattooists actually did, in a sense.
Depending on the complexity of the piece, your tattoo could range from hours to months to be complete in multiple sessions. Afterwards, that tattoo is going to require some care. Peeling and redness is bound to follow, so please listen to your tattoo artist's instructions. A lot of the time, tattoo artists will recommend putting a thin layer of petroleum jelly and a bandage atop your new tattoo. Matt also advises people to only get tattoos while sober.
You would get the people that would get liquored up and get the liquid courage in them, and let's hit the bar, get drunk, and go get tattooed. We don't put up with that, That's also when tattoo shops used a throwback to when tattoo shops were open till midnight, 1 a.m. in the morning. Now we close at 8. We keep our hours so that we're not having to deal with people that are under the influence of anything. And if somebody's visibly under the influence when we come in, we suggest that it's a better, they'd have a better experience when they come back when they're not under the influence.
As we said earlier in previous episodes, tattoos are an art that has existed for countless years in countless countries. They vary with many different cultures, styles, and techniques. With each tattoo is a tattoo artist's hard work, effort, and time. This is your first tattoo, so explore your options and appreciate the work these artists are putting in. Make sure there aren't any issues with the tattoo you desire, be careful, and have fun. Thank you for listening to Ink Inc. with me, Sage. This was the finale of Ink Inc., so while you can't catch us later for another episode, you can check out previous episodes and other student-run shows on WMPH.net or on WMPH's SoundCloud. Before ending this series, I'd like to thank Ms. Sophia Schmidt and Mr. Wishengrad for helping me to produce my podcast, for guiding me and giving me advice. Once more, I'm Sage. Thank you for listening to Ink Inc.